Great, so I'd like to introduce Tony Bousel to you, and here he is. Tony, can you tell us a little bit about your work, your inspiration, and how you create your pieces?
Yeah, these new pieces are that are behind me here are recent pieces where I'm actually going in and starting to. I'm working digitally, and then they're printed out, and then I'm working over the top of them using gels and acrylic and inks. And so it's a bit of a new step for me. I've in the past I've worked using a caustic medium over the top, and I've decided to go back to using acrylic. It works well with the individual pieces, and so I'm able to kind of affect textures and stains and underscore certain parts of the composition that I might not necessarily would have done as an original digital print. But here, I'm actually taking it one step further.
Can we take a closer look? And I'm really interested in the inspiration behind your piece. Like we have some ravens.
Oh, the crows. Well, they're actually crows were. Oftentimes, they start off with photographs from walks that I'm taking, and the crows both sets of both pieces that use crows were from a walk that I was taking with the dog, and stopped to photograph a couple of crows, and then they wind up sort of being reintroduced in a variety of different pieces as subject matter.
And I love your use of color as well. I mean, that's a big element of your work.
Yeah, the color is. I'm drawn to complementary colors and complementary aspects of sort of. Has to do also with color temperature in photography. So warm color temperature versus cool color temperature, and a lot of neutrals that I like as well. So
fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So here we have one of my pieces. This one's called The Warrior, and there's lots of different influences here, from Chinese to Benin sculpture, and I wanted to play with very minimalist elements, and I just love the the teal color, and just the simplicity of the form. And with my other work, which is very different too, this one is called Summer Itch, and it's obviously a rabbit or a hare scratching, and it's probably the sculptures that I'm most known for, but quite a different style, but a bit of sense of humor, and it's just really just having a bit of fun, really. And again, I love playing with the patinas and different colors on sculpture and try and capture some of that movement. My most recent work involves using a multitude of materials. This one here is made from cement, pewter, and steel. And some very strong imagery. I've started using halos a lot in my work, and I don't always have a fixed outcome, but everything I do starts with a particular mood or feeling. And so I wanted to show this kind of inward-looking piece, but with some self-reflection. But there's also a spiritual dimension to it as well, and like a divine element. And again, just playing with color and form and texture, and just breaking down some of the form to its basic shapes, I find really stimulating. So it's very experimental, and I'm looking to see how my work evolves from here. Hi, this is Laurie Latmore, and Laurie would like to welcome you to the exhibition tonight. And I'm really interested to find out more about your work, your inspiration, your use of color, and maybe you could explain a bit more about how you do all of that and what inspires you to create things.
Well, I think with my paintings, I'm inspired by my husband, David Latmore, for one thing. So a lot of the techniques and the colors that I'm using and the paints I'm using, I'm sort of picking up those techniques from him. I'm inspired by flowers because I think that they're a really beautiful part of creation, and I think even though they're very small, they kind of for me symbolize just stars and the larger creation. And it doesn't really matter whether it's something very small or very big. It's just all part of what the universe is made of, and if you believe in a higher power, what the higher power kind of brings into the universe, or and then being painting, you're allowed to be part of that because you get to create too. So it's about that. It's about light in the darkness for one thing. When I paint, a lot of that is trying to sort of show that light in the darkness, and I think finding comfort in looking at stars at night is another thing. There's quite a few things that are kind of going through my mind when I'm painting these kind of night flowers and night gardens. With this one, I'm kind of thinking of all the kind of biochemical elements and forces in the universe kind of coming in and sort of bursting out and making stars or making flowers. So those are some of the things that are going on.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So you're not just splashing paint on a canvas.
But there's
I didn't realize there's so much depth to your work there. I'm so inspired.
But a lot of it is, there is that fun part of also just pushing paint around.
Fantastic.
There's definitely that.
Well, I love the way you're integrating color and just the confidence, the new confidence that you're showing in your work, which I think is
Thank you. I think it just
tremendous.
comes from doing it. The more you do it,
Yeah.
that's just the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with the materials, and you can just experiment a bit.
Does it
more.
make you feel happy to do these paintings?
Yes, it does. It's sometimes when I'm first painting, it feels wonderful. It feels good when you start slapping color on and you sort of feel uninhibited, and that's a really fun part. And then you get to the middle part where you think, oh my God, there's now what am I going to do? And maybe it's not quite as you first intended. And so then it's trying to sort it out, and you're looking and you think, okay, where do you want light, and where do you want shadow, and what do you want to cover up, and what do you want to remain there? And so there's all that sort of struggle in the middle of it. But then at the end, if I'm, when I finish it, then usually there is a certain amount of happiness if if I'm pleased that it sort of is saying something that I wanted to say. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's tremendous. Thank you so much.
thank you.
This is David Ladmore, who does the amazing landscapes that we often see at the Imagists shows here. And David, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your work, what inspires you, and what keeps you doing what you're doing.
That's a good question. Yeah. What keeps me doing, first of all, is compulsion. There's no rational reason. I just can't stop doing it. Basically, it's a sort of a little dysfunctional, maybe. The inspiration behind comes from childhood memories of woodlands where I used to wander a lot on my own, and I was always fascinated by the light. So this whole series of about 40 paintings is called Woodland Light. So it's exploring the different relationships between the color, the saturation, the warm, the cool, the masses, the lines that connect them all, but without actually drawing anything. You won't see me drawing any leaves or tree trunks. They're basically forms that intuitively, that you recognize, but there isn't anything descriptive there. There's no narrative. These are all abstract lines. So they're designed to kind of go straight into your subconscious. So you're not saying, this is a wood. You're just saying these abstract forms which seem to go straight in you, if it's possible. And in that way, they hit a deeper, a kind of a deeper point inside you.
So you're really evoking memory and using that as your inspiration.
This symbol and imagery and the whole thing, there's supposed to be a sense of light that kind of comes through, and it's a portal and it pulls you in. The forms themselves were developed from studying fractals, geometry, and morphogenesis, chaos theory, where you have these forms are the same everywhere. This is a logarithmic spiral in here, and the same form is repeated throughout here in all the smaller things. So you can take a really close-up photograph in there and it will reflect the whole thing. So that's where the fractal geometry comes into.
I never really knew that before.
We never asked me.
I did not.
So it's a movement of the brush, and what happens there's this chaos theory which is that a simple formula, mathematically it's programmed into the whole structure of the universe, where you can have a simple mathematical formula, and it's not like a clockwork universe. Things happen, it evolves into an infinite amount of different forms, all from the same simple form. Things just expand, and that's where the naturalism and the morphogenesis comes from. So I tend to these are not composed really in an abstract way. They're kind of begun, and I let them evolve as they want to,
Right.
by keeping that same movement going, and watching the relationships form between the colors and the values and color temperature, and keeping a close eye on it.
Fantastic.
And they're also done in transparent color, which means they have to be done once. You can't. It's like watercolor. It's watercolor technique. So I'm not using opaque color at all on these. It's basically a watercolor which is done in oil. So you can't mush them around. Once they're down there, you've got to leave them. So
Right.
it may take a dozen times to get the whole canvas right. And if it doesn't work out, you have to take the whole thing off, prepare the surface again, and then go back in. So it's not like a stand back, circumspect kind of a dab. It takes a lot of energy, and you kind of throw yourself into it and hope that something comes out the other end.
Well, you get a lot of success, David, and I think whatever
Thank
you're
you.
doing,
Thank
you've
you.
got to keep doing it because it's working
Yes.
for you. And,
Okay, I will.
I really appreciate you explaining that because I had no idea of the depth of interpretation that you were going to explain there in terms of how you construct your work, and I think it throws a whole new light on it.
Oh, really? Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, it's quite often to explain this so many times, I tend to, I suppose, not really. I just kind of what I say is, well, I just throw paint at it and then see what
Exactly.
happens because it's easier to say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to try and kind of explain things a little more. That's what I've been
You
told.
are. Well, you definitely educated me, and I'm sure you've educated everybody else who's going to watch this video.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Here we have Paul Perigal, and Paul, I was really interested in the title of this painting here, Matisse Drives to Nice Through London.
Right, which is an entirely unlikely scenario, seeing as he probably actually never learned to drive and lived in Nice for a great part of his mature painting life. And and living in France would most unlikely have taken perhaps a wrong turn somewhere to a ferry, which would have brought him to the coast of England, and from there he would have had to have driven, possibly being lost on his way to trying to find his way back to Nice. So this was actually initially it began as a response to the show that Efren had organized just last month, and it had to do with a Richter painting, and so my response had to do with the colors that I initially saw in that Richter painting, with green and red, and so large green car of Matisse's and the red awning behind him and on the gallery or store sign and so on. And that was actually the origin or the derivation of that painting. But also at the same time, for example, this painting over here is this painting I was based on the West End of London, and where I had previously done another painting using the same locale. But in that particular case, it had to do with a rather cool character driving one of the old Citroëns from the 30s and looking for a way out, but he's in a cul-de-sac. He's caught. And he's going down one street, up another, trying to look for a way of getting out of the predicament he's in. And what that painting was all about was a certain metaphor on, first of all, World War II, which was approaching, because the painting itself was called 1939 Cul-de-sac, and a metaphor for life, one's mortality. This painting is actually, the location is a small town in England, Newark-on-Trent, and it is a street called Kirkgate. And there is a certain mysterious incident that has occurred in the painting, in this scenario I've painted. But I will not divulge what that is. It's called Incident in Kirkgate. And for those people who are curious enough to want to investigate it, they can come down and have a look at the painting.
Very enigmatic, Paul, I must say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love your use of color and the rhythm and just the style that you've developed, which I think is quite unique. Anyone that sees your painting would instantly recognize it as being one of your paintings. And,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, and I love the fact you have these narratives as well.
Oh, stories. It's all about stories for me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. So I'd like to introduce Arunima to you. She's going to be managing the Blue Road Gallery here in Victoria, and really excited to have her involved in the gallery. And Arunima, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and the kind of things that you would like to see happen here at the gallery?
Okay, should I hold the microphone?
If you like.
No, thanks. A bit about me. I'm very much into performance art, dance, movement. That's kind of my background. So, what I want to see happen here, I'm interested in seeing a lot more engaging, like interactive art projects happening. Kind of a blending of more traditional things with more avant-garde, modern, contemporary things happening. We want to be doing a lot of more like puppet shows, movement pieces, like things that will really engage others and fully utilize the space. So I'm excited about that.
Fantastic, and we're excited about that too. Aruna's amazingly organised, and I think her passion is obviously to see a full breadth of the arts expressed, and so as well as having exhibitions like this could be many events that you're going to be involved in planning.
Definitely.
And just bringing some life and energy into the space, so it's going to be fantastic.